It's Sunday, I'm feeling spooky, and we are back for more of your ghost encounters. And today, we're talking all about loved ones who have passed over. Now, there are 3 stories in today's video, and I am so excited to read these to you. Now, for anyone who's new to these videos, hello, my name is Hearth. I'm passionate about witchcraft and also ghosts and spirits. And a few months ago, I opened up a form for all of my subscribers to submit their ghost stories. And in these videos, we share just a few of them. There are some quite long ones in today's video. And if you would also like to be included, feel free to use the form in the description box, and your stories might make an appearance in these videos. Now, today, there are some that look really, really cool. Some of them are going to be quite heartbreaking, so I will warn you in advance. But we're going to end on something that is a little bit lighter, I hope. We'll see. Now, if you watched last week's episode, you will likely remember Denise's story all about the Royal Stoke Hospital. Now, this is actually the other part of Denise's story, and it actually comes from her mother. Now, for safety's sake, I will just be taking out some personal information just to make sure that everyone's staying safe. But this is the story. My grandparents had lived in a property, and when my granddad died, my gran had a stroke and was taken into hospital. While she was in there, the decision was taken to move her to sheltered housing. Mum went to the house to start clearing, and she noticed the smell of cigarettes. My granddad smoked Park Drive, and she recognised the smell straight away. But there was a curtain right next to his chair, and he was a chronic smoker. The wallpaper itself was probably impregnated. Anyway, when she went into the living room, she saw Granddad's rocking chair rock slowly, back and forth. Back and forth. And it wasn't the usual kind of chair on curved rockers. It was a G-plan rocker which had springs. It didn't rock on its own. You had to push it. Mum was a bit nonplussed, said quietly, "Hello, Dad," grabbed her coat and bag and left. When Gran came out of hospital and was preparing to move, Mum asked her what she wanted to take because there wouldn't be enough room for all of her stuff. Gran said, quote, "I know what I'm not taking, that chair. I've sat in it once or twice, and I could feel your dad in it with me. I've also seen it rocking," end quote. Gran was more disturbed by the experience than my mum was. My mum wasn't frightened, just a bit taken aback. That was in 1990, and to this day, she still says it was her dad telling her he was okay. It's been a comfort to her, as she was very close to him. That very much sums up a lot of people's experiences in their own homes or in the homes of people that they cared about. And it's usually triggered by something that we don't see that much of today in a society where a lot of people will rent their properties. If you purchased a house in the 1940s, 1950s, you'd probably stay there for the rest of your life. And so a lot of these houses don't just have a couple of years worth of experience. They might have 20, 30, 40, 60, 70 years of one person or one family living in that property. And so when that happens, you have a lot of energy that's been built up, a lot of repetition, and so things are likely going to manifest strongly in those areas. Now, the one thing that I will say in this is something I've experienced for myself. If you have ever been in a house with a heavy smoker, it tends to seep through the walls, it tends to seep into paint, into wallpaper, into carpets, fabrics, everything. I mean, just from experience, my doors in this house, so like all of the interior doors, we believe were actually taken from a different property. And you can paint them white as many times as you want. As often as you want, it's not going to make a difference because whoever had them in their house before was such a heavy smoker that the yellow tinge of cigarette smoke just seeps through the paint over and over and over again. It doesn't matter what you do. You can sand it down, you can prime it, you can use the best paint ever, you can use paint that is designed to stop that from happening. It ain't going to make a difference. All of my doors are kind of a weird shade of magnolia. And that's just because that yellow stickiness seeps through the paint. And that applies to every surface. So you might wash a set of curtains a dozen times, but you might still find that, especially when they get hot, they still release that cigarette-y smoke. So that one I could maybe dismiss if it was a standalone, but it isn't. This is very much part of a bigger thing. And so then when you get to that rocking chair, that's when you go, okay, so while at first that is something that I could maybe dismiss as being mundane, this I definitely can't dismiss as being mundane. And this is often what takes what may well be just a generic trick of the light. It might just be something that you can smell randomly because of something else in the property. It takes that into being, oh no, this is actually spirit activity. And it may well be, if your granddad had lived there for an extended period of time, that he's just going about through his routines. He's just doing what he always has done. He might have stood in this one spot or sat in this one chair or gone through the motions. So this may either be an active spirit haunting, so the spirit is actually present in that space. It may also be an echo of like repeated behavior that is just coming through again. Either way, I am glad that your gran was okay. Now, obviously, this is the 90s, so it's quite a while ago. But I'm glad that at the time your gran was okay, and hopefully the move went well. And yeah, it's one of those where it's a sad story. I can understand why someone would be creeped out by it a little bit. But it's also nice that your mother knows, like, her dad was there, present. Like, even in a moment that could be really, really upsetting of having to pack up all of the stuff, that her dad was there. I think that's really, really comforting. Now, up next is a story that I think could be a little bit much for some people. If you do struggle with the topic of alcohol abuse, maybe this one isn't for you. I'm going to try to tweak the story a little bit so that it isn't too sensitizing for people, but I will leave a timestamp on the screen if you do think just generally it's going to be too much. This one is heartbreaking, but I do also think it says a lot about the way that mediums work and also the sensitivity that individuals and animals will often feel. My first husband died suddenly in his mid-40s, 17 years ago. Back in 2010, I bought my first tarot deck, Rider-Waite-Smith, good choice, and started studying, including attending tarot classes with a lady who ran a tarot and Reiki center. I also had a few Reiki sessions and went for a tarot reading with mediumship. Now bear in mind that she knew that I was a widow, but that was about it. We sat with a small round table in between us and she shuffled. I distinctly felt a sort of coolish breeze brush past my right shoulder, and it crossed over the table to her right shoulder. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew it was my husband. I had asked for him in relation to the mediumship part of the reading. I said nothing, and she continued to shuffle. She laid out the cards, and to this day I can't remember what they were, but she told me that she could feel him standing behind her right shoulder, and he was telling her about how he had died. That he was in a mental state that he couldn't get out of, and suddenly a door opened, and he fell forwards and through it. As she told me this, she demonstrated with her body bending forwards from the waist as though squeezing through a tight corner. He told her about his alcoholism and that he wanted both her and me to help people who were addicted to drink, that it was something he needed to get out there. The phrasing and the words she used were very much the same way my husband spoke when he was alive. What the medium didn't know was that the morning that I'd found him, he had died in his sleep on the sofa, and his body was in the same position that she had created with her body during the reading. His sister also told me of a vivid dream where he had appeared to her, but at first she didn't recognise him. He was standing in a doorway. These are all details that I did not share with this medium. I have had no contact like this either before or after this reading, and that's fine. I felt my husband was safe in the next world and that he was at peace. In the first months after he'd gone, I did have some odd things happen. One of these being an Allen key, which operated the internal bolt on the back door, which I had thrown in a drawer. The door had a normal key and lock, and while my husband had been obsessed with using the lock and the bolt, I felt it wasn't necessary. The night of his funeral, I was locking up to go to bed, and the key was slotted into the bolt hole, and I know I hadn't put it there. His garage was a chaotic mess, to which I only got the keys to after he died. But if I ever went in there, it had a sort of quiet stillness, and I would ask, come on, where's the 10mm spanner, or whatever, and it would just be there, on top of a pile of stuff. The other experience I had was the night he died. He'd fell asleep on the sofa, I placed a blanket over him and went up to bed, taking the dog with me. At about 4 a.m.-ish, I woke up to find the dog, a small terrier, standing quivering at the end of the bed, looking towards the window, whimpering and shivering. It was as though she could see something through the window. She kept this up for a good minute or so. Then she dived under the duvet and stayed there until I got up to get ready at 7 a.m. for work. She did often creep under the duvet, but she never stayed there for that long because she got too hot. Anyway, when I got up at 7, I went to let her out into the garden, went into the living room, and there I found my husband. I called for an ambulance, but there was nothing to be done. The crew reckoned he'd been gone for a few hours, and I'm convinced my little dog knew. For all I know, he could have been standing in front of that window, but of course, I couldn't see him, which is just so chilling. Like, all of this is just such a horrific thing to go through, so I'm so sorry that you have had to deal with this. And if anyone is dealing with this themselves or has a loved one who is going through something similar with alcohol or any substance, I'm going to try to leave some links, some numbers in the description box so that you can reach out to someone if you are struggling, because I don't want anyone else to have to go through this experience, whether themselves or whether with a loved one. It's just so horrific, and I really hope that you are doing better now. I'm not going to share any information about who you are, but I really hope that you are doing okay, and that clearly you've had success with your magical and spiritual journey, because you wouldn't be here otherwise. But this is very layered to me. So we've already mentioned in the past how spirits will often come through to animals. They're a lot more sensitive. Animals and children are considerably more sensitive than adults are. So it really wouldn't surprise me if your husband had come through and your dog was actually the only one to sense that something was wrong in that given moment, to sense that something was different. I think it's quite interesting. It clearly came as a shock because the dog did not want to be a part of that situation. I don't think that that is anything negative on the spirit in question or the individual in question. I suspect it's a little bit like how when you see anything out of the ordinary for the first time, it comes as a bit of a surprise to you. The main thing I wanted to focus on though, well, we have the sweetness of things still being there, like the wanting to make sure that you are locking that door. Like, even though you normally wouldn't lock it that way, to be like, no, come on, like, safety, extra safety. Oh, you need this thing? Here it is. I think it's really sweet that that's how things were coming through afterwards. The medium, though, in this situation is what I primarily wanted to focus on, because I think it shows the way that mediums work and how different mediums will work in different ways. So sometimes I hear complaints over mediums, and I think I'm going to do an entire video on mediums and kind of the way they work in the future. But a lot of people say, well, they didn't come out with explicit facts, therefore they are lying, or this didn't come through the way I expected it to come through, therefore they're a nonsense reader, you know? In reality, mediums and any kind of reader, they often have things come through in sometimes unusual ways, and I think this is a great example of that. There's a lot of sensitivity here to the breeze over the right-hand shoulder, but primarily it is this sensation more than anything. It is the bodily feelings, this positioning that is what was most significant to the reader at the time. And I think that is very, very interesting because it shows how this particular medium works. Sometimes mediums will get things through verbally. So it will be as though someone is speaking to them. This might be directly from the spirit. This might be from a guide that is acting as an intermediary between the medium and the spirit world. So this could be a guide, this could be a familiar. It depends on the practice of the individual person. But sometimes you will get mediums where what they actually get through are bodily feelings. So they aren't seeing anything. So if someone has had a heart attack, for instance, they might feel this pain here, or if the person they're speaking about in particular maybe was missing a limb, then they might say that they feel like all of this isn't there, like this doesn't exist. Everything comes through in feelings. And then you have other mediums where what they get through is more of a visual descriptor. So they might get no words through at all, but they might see the visuals of something. And then that's what they need to be passing over to you in the physical world. And it seems very much like this medium, because they were doing tarot at the same time, they're doing a bit of a blend to fill in gaps. And that's not a bad thing. I don't want anyone to think that that's a bad thing, because it isn't. It just means that we can get a more detailed reading on a particular topic, because while we might only get sensations in one way, we might feel things in our body, or we might only see them, it allows us to get additional context that we wouldn't have from just this non-verbal communication. Now, if you are a medium that gets verbal communication, your life is probably a little bit easier, because instead of having to figure out what that spirit is attempting to show you or tell you or share with you, you're being verbally told it. This is why when you see some mediums work, they'll be like, okay, I'm seeing this. And it's not necessarily, some mediums are trying to get you to like do the reading for them, but for a lot of very legitimate readers, they're going off what they have and they don't have the context to that scenario. So this medium in particular was able to do the bodily motion, but didn't entirely perhaps understand why that physical movement was related to the reading. It takes the person having that reading done to kind of connect the dots. And that's why I often consider readings, it's a little bit like therapy. Ironically, it's a little bit like therapy, where you can go to a phenomenal reader, but you have to participate in that reading. Just like to have really successful therapy, you have to do the work in therapy. The therapist can't do it for you. A lot of the times when you're working with a medium, while you don't want to be giving them ridiculous amounts of information, it is good to kind of be connecting the dots in your head and try to figure out what they are referencing, especially if something comes through quickly like this, where it's like, oh my God, that's exactly the positioning that he was found in. This makes total sense to me. There's often some like background work that needs to be done by the person who's having the reading done for them. So obviously if a reader is going, I think it begins with M, does it begin with M? That's a little bit too much sometimes. It depends on the reading, depends on their style. I'm not going to paint everyone with a sweeping brush, but then when someone says to you, okay, I'm getting this smell and I'm getting this positioning and I'm seeing this environment, then it might be worth kind of filling in some of the blanks, because you have some specifics there that are really tailored to that reading. So this is one of those where it is very intense. I did try to make it as YouTube friendly as possible, and to avoid triggering anyone who does find this topic particularly sensitive. And then the last one is just a little bit lighter to finish this off, because sometimes it may well seem as though family members coming through would be really upbeat and quite happy and cheerful. It tends to bring up heavy emotions that a random ghost coming through just wouldn't. If you were to see some random lady who had fallen down a flight of stairs 400 years ago, while it's a sad situation, it doesn't have the same emotional context as if it is a direct family member. So this one is kind of a few kind of thrown in together with a few smaller ones at the end that I think could be interesting talking points. A good friend of mine lost his mother. He's not the emotional kind of guy, so he repressed his sadness and tried to act like nothing had happened. We met for a New Year's Eve party, and over the course of the evening, it became harder for him to hold it in, and eventually he broke down crying. We were standing in a circle around him, being there for him, and that's when I saw his mother, standing behind him in all white with a light gold aura around her and smiling as if she'd been waiting for him to let it out. I was completely sober and I clearly felt her presence, so I accepted the possibility that her spirit wanted to see if he was doing okay before crossing over. But I wasn't sure, because it looked really like a cliché spirit from a movie. The most interesting thing for me happened afterwards. My brain desperately tried to come up with a rational explanation for the additional presence in that room, like someone is standing behind me, or around the corner, or in the bathroom. That's what convinced me that what I saw was real, because if I imagined it, my mind wouldn't need to come up with an explanation. The day after, I learned that I wasn't the only one who felt her presence. Now that's one story, so let's focus on that one for now. This is actually really, really lovely. Like, this is beautiful. Obviously, very, very difficult for the man involved. And so once again, I will say that if you are struggling with grief, please reach out to someone. That doesn't have to be a medical professional. That could just be a trusted friend, a family member. Please reach out to someone, because grief needs to be processed one way or another. And what a lot of people tend to do, and sadly what a lot of men tend to do, is that they feel like that grief is a weakness, and they tend to push it down, and then it will start bubbling up in their life when it's not been processed. And so if you have the opportunity to talk to someone in your life, please do so. If you can't and you would rather talk to a third party that is completely separate, there are people that you can go to who will support through grief. These may be online grief counsellors, in-person grief counsellors that can help to process the really, really big emotions that often need to be unpacked when we go through something really strong like this. Like, this is not something that you're going to be able to bounce back from instantaneously. It's going to take time. And so I really find a lot of comfort in the fact that his mother was there watching him, probably for that exact reason. She's probably witnessed him bottling it all up and pretending like everything is fine, and now she's like, okay, he's starting to heal. Like, this is the first steps of healing, because it sucks and you feel awful. Like, I'm not gonna deny that. Like, when you first let it hit you that like this is real, this is reality, it is like unimaginable sadness. But you have to go through that sadness to get to the bit on the other side of it. And so this, especially with like the light gold is often used, especially in healing magics, as a sign of divine light. That doesn't necessarily mean divine like godly. It usually means like higher energy, like higher levels of energy. So it is something that is healing and nurturing and protective. And so a lot of practitioners will use this color in their visualizations for things like protection and healing magic. A lot of energy healers will use it along with white light for that exact reason as well. It often has this nurturing, protective energy. And she may well have been there saying, you know, you've made the first steps. Like, I'm really proud of you. You've made that step. So I think that one is really, really beautiful. And it's really just a shame that he wasn't able to experience that himself. He may well have been feeling her presence there, but probably wasn't able to witness it in the same way other people were. And it is completely normal to try to rationalize it as well. Like, I think it takes a lot to go from maybe being a skeptic to being a believer. There's a big, big expanse of time that for some people never goes away, where you're constantly questioning things. You know, maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was just someone dressed up. Maybe they're somewhere else now that I didn't see them before. I know I don't recognize them, but maybe I just imagined it. Like, we tend to run through all of these things, and I think that's completely rational. Now, the other two stories, I think, only show that you are very, very sensitive to spirits in very, very different ways, which is really good. You have what I would consider to be kind of a wide spectrum sensitivity, which might make no sense, but some people are very, very sensitive to only family members. Some people are very, very sensitive only during heightened times, like specific Sabbats, especially Beltane and Samhain. Some people are very sensitive to only a certain type of spirit, so they might only see shades, or they might only see fae, or they might only see ancestors. It appears as though you are quite wide spectrum in what you can encounter. The other day, I was brushing my teeth and looked down, and there was a cat standing at my feet, but it disappeared immediately. Scared the shit out of me, that little one. I don't own a cat. I just love the wording on that one. I just like the casualness of like, scared the shit out of me, that little one. I love that. Yeah, animal spirits coming through, especially to people who are sensitive to spirits, is quite commonplace. You may well find that that particular spirit will come back again because it knows that it's made you jump the first time. And if it knows you've made you jump, then that means that it's likely going to come back and get another reaction off you. And then the last one is, I was walking through the forest and saw a lady in a long black dress looking at me, then disappearing behind a tree. but the tree was way too small for her to hide behind. Now, this could be many different things. We could be looking at fae, we could be looking at nature spirits. I'm maybe more inclined towards fae or a human spirit that has passed over. And it's often this idea that the spiritual plane and the physical plane, while they overlap, their rules aren't the same. And so for us, if you pass behind a tree, you have to come out the other side. That isn't necessarily true if you're part in the spirit plane, part in the physical plane. Those rules are not the same. And so you often find spirits doing bizarre things, like going from being really, really big to really, really small, or vice versa. They will fit through gaps that are physically impossible for any living being to fit through, or they might suddenly vanish into literally thin air. And so this is something that very much could be one of those, oh no, I've been spotted, I gotta go. Or it may well be simply curiosity. And then she's decided, you know what, I've had my fill for today. But those are the stories for today. Quite a lot of intense ones there, actually. Maybe a little bit more intense than I was anticipating. So how about we have something a little bit light for the very, very end of this video? I actually got a submission, which is not a story in itself, but it's actually a piece of art that has been created by Lyra Cassia. I really, really hope that I got your name right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. I will put it on the screen. They have an Instagram account. You can follow them. And they've said, hello. After hearing the story from your video about the spirit in the boat, I got inspired by it and made a drawing in the photo below. Is there a possibility to let the person that submitted the story know that a random girl made a drawing of their experience? And this is the piece of art in question. And is this not just absolutely incredible? Like, oh, the motion in the water, and just the picture gives me chills, having obviously learned the story. That is absolutely beautiful. So if you happen to be watching said person who submitted the original story, someone was incredibly inspired by it, and this is a gorgeous piece of art. Like, you are so unbelievably talented. So if you want to give them a follow, I will leave that information down in the description box. And if anyone is inspired by any of the stories that we talk about in these videos, feel free to send over your art, because I would love to see people's art. This is just absolutely incredible. Like, what? People are this talented. This is off a story. Like, I'm not even joking when I say that this is like what I saw in my head, but kind of the opposite way round. So for me, like, this exact figure like that was in a boat just like that, coming towards me in my head. It's just incredible. So that's my light-hearted ending to today's video. I hope that you did enjoy this one. If you have any opinions or any kind of additional information for any of the stories in this video, do let me know in the comment section. Let's have a bit of a chat about it. And if you have a ghost encounter that you would like to share on this channel, feel free to submit it via the form in the description box. So I hope that you did enjoy this video. Liking, commenting, subscribing, it all massively helps. I know that the ghosty videos don't necessarily get the same views as the witchy content, but I just love them so much that I can't stop. I'll be honest, I can't stop. So I hope that you enjoy them too. I hope you have a marvelous magical day. I hope you have a good night's sleep after all of these spooky stories, and I will see you on Wednesday for another video. Okay, bye!